They say weddings bring families together. But for me, it did the opposite. When my son told me he was getting married, I was over the moon. I still remember the way his eyes lit up. He said, "Mom, I found the one." And just like that, my heart melted. I'd raised him alone for most of his life. 2 jobs, late nights, missed meals. I didn't always have much, but I made sure he never felt the lack. So when he told me she was the one, I made a decision. I would give him the wedding of his dreams. Not the budget version, not just enough, but the kind of wedding he could look back on and say, "My mom made this happen." I cashed out a savings bond I'd been holding since he was a baby. I delayed fixing the roof. I postponed my own retirement plans. Every spare dollar, gone. $40,000. That's what I spent. The venue was a vineyard. Elegant, open skies, sunset ceremony. The food? Filet mignon, custom cocktails, gluten-free cake for her cousin. I even paid for her dress, a Vera Wang custom fit, flown in from New York. People told me I was doing too much. They said, "You're spoiling them. Let them pay their share." But they didn't understand. This wasn't just about money. This was my love, in physical form, my gratitude. My way of saying, "You matter, your happiness matters." I was so proud, so proud, and maybe a little blind, because the truth? The cracks had already started showing, and I had no idea. This was the beginning of the end. At first, I thought it was just nerves. You know, wedding stress, big decisions, family dynamics. It happens. But looking back, the signs were always there. It started small, little comments that didn't sit right. One day, I dropped off a check for the florist, and she said, without looking up from her phone, "You didn't have to do that. My parents could have handled it." But not in a grateful way, not even a polite way. More like I had overstepped, like I was invading her turf. Another time, I brought over a box of handmade decorations, vintage lace I'd saved from my wedding. I thought it'd be meaningful, something old, something loved. She barely glanced at it, said, "Yeah, that's not really our aesthetic," then handed it off to someone like it was trash. Still, I told myself, let it go. She's just stressed. Focus on the big picture, but every interaction chipped away at something inside me. She never called me Mom, or even Mrs. Green. She called me by my first name. Cold, distant, like I was some event coordinator she was forced to tolerate. And my son, he noticed. I know he did. Once, I caught his eyes when she made a snide joke about my dress. Just a flicker, a split second of discomfort. But then it was gone. He smiled, laughed, changed the subject. I wanted to believe he was just keeping the peace, but deep down, I wondered if he was afraid to stand up to her. And then there was the rehearsal dinner. Oh, the moment I should have known. We were at a beautiful little restaurant, tucked in the hills. I paid for everything. 3 courses, open bar, custom menus. I watched her go around the room, introducing her family like they were royalty. "This is my dad, our rock. This is my mom, the heart of our home." And when she got to me, she said, "This is Diane. She's funding all this. Not my future mother-in-law, not the woman who raised the man I'm marrying, just a walking wallet." People chuckled awkwardly. My son squeezed my hand under the table, and again, I smiled. I smiled through the burn in my throat. Because I told myself, this is his day. Don't ruin it. But what I didn't realize was, this wasn't his day anymore. It was hers, and she was making that very clear. Still, I didn't say a word. Not yet. The morning of the wedding felt Strange. Not exciting, not joyful, just heavy. Like something was pressing on my chest that I couldn't shake off. But I smiled anyway. Fixed my hair, put on my navy dress, the one my son said made me look like royalty. I told myself, today is about love. Today is about my son. The vineyard was picture perfect. Golden sunlight dripping through the vines. White chairs lined up like pearls. A string quartet played softly in the background. Guests were arriving, laughing, taking selfies. I stood by the ceremony arch, soaking it all in, thinking, this is it. I did it. I made it real for him. Then I saw her, the bride. She walked up like she was floating, flawless in her designer gown. Everything around her quieted, like the whole vineyard took a breath. I smiled at her. I wanted to say how beautiful she looked, how proud I was to be part of this day. But before I could open my mouth, she stepped closer, too close, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You can sit in the back. This is my family now." Just like that. No smile, no warmth, just ice. I blinked. I thought maybe I misheard. The back? I looked around. The front rows were roped off, for her family only. My name wasn't on any seat. No sign, no flower, no mention. The same woman whose wedding I'd paid for, the dress, the venue, the napkins with their initials stamped in gold, was telling me to sit in the back like some stranger who'd wandered in off the street. I opened my mouth, then shut it, because right then, I realized something. This wasn't a slip. This wasn't stress. This was intentional. It was her way of telling me, you don't belong here. And the worst part? My son was right behind her. He saw everything. He heard it, and he said, nothing, nothing. He just looked away, like maybe if he didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't be real. And that was when something inside me changed. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't beg for a seat in the front row of a wedding I'd built from the ground up. I just nodded, stepped aside, and reached into my clutch for my phone. Because if I wasn't welcome at my own son's wedding, then neither was the wedding itself. I stepped aside. My heels clicked softly against the stone path as I moved out of the spotlight. I found a quiet corner, just far enough to disappear, but close enough to watch the illusion unravel. My hands were steady. Too steady, actually. Like my body had gone into some kind of quiet autopilot, while my heart just shut the door. I opened my phone. There was only one number I needed. The man on the other end picked up on the first ring. I didn't even greet him. I just said, "It's time." He paused, then asked, "All of it?" I took a breath, looked up at the string lights swaying above the tables, the waiters adjusting crystal glasses, the photographer lining up her next shot. All of it. "Yes," I said. "Everything. Shut it down." You see, what no one realized was that every vendor, every contract, every moving part of this fairy tale wedding was tied to me. My name, my credit card, my signature. I paid for it, which meant I could end it. And I did. First, the florist. The coordinator walked over to the arch and began removing the flowers. People stared, confused, whispered. Then the caterer. The kitchen doors shut tight. No servers came out. Appetizers stopped mid-tray. The champagne, gone. The DJ? He packed up his equipment so fast, it was like watching a magic trick. No music, just silence. And the string lights? Office. The power was cut, intentionally. Within 10 minutes, the entire venue was unraveling, thread by golden thread. Guests looked around, startled. Some started asking questions. Others just watched in disbelief as the perfect little fantasy crumbled right in front of them. And the bride? Oh, she was livid, red-faced, high heels stomping, veil flapping behind her like a flag of war. She marched toward the planner, screaming about ruined moments and contracts, but the planner calmly pointed at her clipboard and said, "Sorry, ma'am, the client has canceled." She blinked. The client? I'm the bride. But it didn't matter, because I was the one who paid. I was the client, and I had just canceled her fairy tale in real time. Chaos doesn't always come with screaming. Sometimes it creeps in through confusion. People stood around, stunned, cameras in hand, mouths half open. 1 minute, it was the wedding of the year. The next, it looked like a rehearsal that had been abruptly abandoned. And then, the bride lost it. Not quietly, not with dignity. She screamed, loud enough for the hills to echo. "What the hell is happening?" She shoved a centerpiece off a table. It shattered. Water spilled over the guestbook. She turned on the planner again. "You can't cancel my wedding." And that's when I stepped forward. Not rushing, not dramatic, just calm. I stood where everyone could see me now. The guests, the staff, and most of all, my son. She spotted me, eyes narrowing like a predator. But I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "This isn't your wedding anymore." She froze. "Excuse me?" I repeated. "This wedding doesn't belong to you. It never did." She turned to my son. "Are you hearing this? Say something. Do something." He opened his mouth, closed it again, and then he looked at me. For the first time in weeks, he really looked at me, and I could see it. The guilt, the shame, the realization that everything he let slide was now crashing down on all of us. But he still said nothing. So I turned back to her, and I said something I hadn't planned, something I didn't know I needed to say until it left my mouth. I raised a good man. But somewhere along the way, he forgot who he was, and who stood by him every step of the way. So maybe this is what it takes to remind him. She scoffed. "So what? You think you can just ruin our day and walk away?" I smiled, not out of spite, but peace. "Sweetheart, this isn't me walking away. This is me letting go." Then I turned to leave, and for the first time that day, the only sound was silence. No music, no laughter, no clinking glasses, just silence, and the sound of a perfect illusion collapsing, piece by piece. I didn't look back, not once. As I walked away, heels clicking against the stone path, the wind brushing past my cheek like a whisper, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I wanted this, but because I refused to be disrespected 1 second longer. And the moment I reached the parking lot, the first message came in, then another, and another. My phone buzzed like a hive. Texts from family members, mutual friends, even distant cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. "What happened? Why did you cancel everything? Did she really tell you to sit in the back?" The story was spreading like wildfire. I didn't have to say a word. People saw it, heard it, felt it. And when the truth is loud enough, you don't need to shout. I sat in my car, hands still trembling, not with fear, but with release. And that's when my son called. At first, I let it ring, twice, 3 times. Then, I answered, not with anger, not with spite, just curiosity. His voice was quiet, too quiet. "Mom, why did you do that?" I waited, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to see if he did. He didn't, so I told him, "Because you let her humiliate me, in front of everyone, and you said nothing." There was a pause. Long, like he couldn't argue, because he knew I was right. Then, his voice cracked. I didn't think it would go that far. That far? You stood by while your wife told your mother to sit in the back of your wedding. You watched her erase me, like I was an inconvenience, like I didn't build that entire day for you. Silence. I didn't cry. I'd done that already, for months, quietly, alone. What I felt now wasn't sadness, it was grief, for the version of my son I thought still existed. Do you even love her? I asked, finally. Another pause. And then, something I didn't expect. I don't know anymore. And just like that, the glass shattered. All the smiles, the filters, the Pinterest perfect engagement. It was never about love. It was about image, control, power. And he had traded his spine for silence. You need to think about who you're becoming, I said. Because right now, I don't recognize you. I hung up. No tears, no drama, just truth. And in the stillness of that moment, with the wedding ashes behind me and the future unwritten in front of me, I drove away, not just from the venue, but from the version of myself who kept shrinking just to make room for people who never made space for me. 2 days passed, no calls, no texts, just silence, not from strangers. Number from the people who should have cared the most. And in that silence, I started seeing everything more clearly. It's funny how betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It hides in, it's not a big deal. In don't make this about you. In, it's her day, not yours. Tiny phrases, soft digs, but sharp enough to bleed you slowly. I was sipping coffee on my porch when the knock came. I opened the door, and there he was. My son. Dark circles under his eyes. Tie loosened, hair messy. But it wasn't his appearance that caught me off guard. It was the look in his eyes, like a man who'd finally realized. He built his whole house on sand. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, hands in his pockets, head low. Then, she's gone. I blinked. What do you mean, gone? He sighed. She packed her things yesterday, said she couldn't be with a man who lets his mother ruin everything. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't need to. But what he said next stopped me cold. She used my card, ran up almost $15,000 in the last 3 months, and she told her friends she was marrying me for the house. I swallowed hard, not because I was shocked, but because I knew. Somewhere deep down, I knew. The way she looked at him wasn't love. It was possession. And the way he defended her, that wasn't loyalty. It was fear. He sat down on the porch step, shoulders slumped, voice hollow. I thought I was building a life with her, but it was all performance, a curated fantasy. I didn't see it. I sat beside him, quiet, still. Then I said something that had been sitting in my chest for years. You didn't lose her, sweetheart. You lost yourself trying to keep her. He looked at me, eyes glassy, broken in the way only betrayal can break you. And in that moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heartbroken, because as much as I'd been humiliated, he'd been used. And suddenly, all that anger I held began to dissolve, because underneath the disappointment was still my son. And he had finally come home, not to a house, but to the truth. The next morning, I walked out to the mailbox, half expecting more silence, maybe a flyer or two, another reminder that the world keeps spinning no matter how much yours falls apart. But there it was, a crisp, cream-colored envelope. No return address. Just my name, handwritten, and the penmanship. I recognized it instantly. Her, the bride. I stared at it for a long moment, felt the heat rise in my chest. part anger, part curiosity. She had never written me a thing before. Not a thank you, not a birthday card, not even a text that felt remotely personal. But this was deliberate. I took it inside, poured myself a drink, stronger than coffee, and opened it. And what I read? It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. You might think you've won, but you don't know everything. You don't know what he promised me. You don't know what he told me about you. You think you raised this golden boy who could do no wrong, but maybe you should ask him what he said behind your back when he thought you weren't listening. Maybe you should ask him what he agreed to give me if I agreed to cut you out. Enjoy your little victory. You'll be alone again soon. My hands trembled, not from fear, but fury, because in just 3 paragraphs, she had lit a match and tossed it into everything I thought had been salvaged. And worse, she was right about one thing. There were things I hadn't asked, things I didn't want to ask, because after everything, a part of me was just grateful he came back. Grateful he said sorry. But now I had to know. I waited until he got home, his face still hollow, his steps heavy, and I didn't waste time. I held the letter up. His eyes widened, then narrowed. He reached for it, but I pulled it back. Tell me the truth, I said. All of it. He sat down slowly, put his head in his hands. Then he whispered, She told me to cut you out, and I said I'd think about it. I stopped breathing. Why? His voice cracked. Because she said it was the only way she'd stay. That if I kept choosing you, we'd always be 3 people in the marriage. She said you were controlling, that you'd ruin her. I didn't believe her at first, but then... He looked up, eyes filled with shame. Then I started to wonder if maybe she was right. Every time you asked about money, or the guest list, or the house, I thought you were trying to take over. I swallowed hard. I wasn't trying to take over, I said, my voice barely holding together. I was trying to protect you, because I saw something in her you didn't. And he broke. Right there on the kitchen floor. He cried, not like a child, but like a man who had finally stopped lying to himself. And I sat beside him, heart torn open, because I knew one thing now for sure. The wedding didn't just expose her, it exposed us. Everything we didn't say, everything we let slide, all the quiet distance we called growing up. But now there was no more hiding. Just 2 broken people finally ready to rebuild something real. The next morning, I found him sitting at the dining table, the same table where we used to have Sunday pancakes. His hands were folded, eyes locked on a single sheet of paper. I didn't have to ask. I knew what it was, the prenup. The one she had signed without reading. The one he had quietly tucked away, never thinking he'd need it. He looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't look like my little boy. He looked like a man standing at a cliff, trying to decide whether to jump or turn back. She called me last night, he said. I stiffened. What did she want? Another chance, he whispered. She said she made a mistake, that she still loves me, that we could start fresh, somewhere far from here. He glanced back down at the paper. But she also said, if I didn't forgive her, she'd tell everyone I forced her to sign this prenup, that I used her, that I tricked her. I could feel the blood drain from my face. And did you? He shook his head. I begged her to get a lawyer. She said she trusted me, and I believed that meant something. He let out a bitter laugh. But love to her was just leverage. I sat beside him, put my hand over his. So, what are you going to do? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into a drawer and pulled out something I hadn't seen in years. A small, worn photo of us. Him at 10 years old, missing teeth. Me laughing behind him, arms wrapped around his shoulders. He held it like it was a lifeline, like he'd just remembered where he came from. I thought marrying her meant growing up, he said. But real growth, it's owning what you allowed and choosing better. He stood up, took the prenup, the photo, and his phone. What are you doing? I asked. He looked at me, clear-eyed for the first time in weeks. Ending it. For real this time. No more begging, no more guilt. She wanted me to choose, and I finally will. He walked out the door, and I stood there in silence, heart pounding. Because whether she begged or threatened, whether she cried or cursed, this time he wasn't bending, and neither was I. Sometimes the hardest part of love is choosing yourself, and watching someone else figure out how to do the same. The hours that followed felt like days. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't even think straight. I knew what was happening, but somehow it didn't feel real. My son had left with the prenup. He had finally taken control. But the weight of his choice hit me harder than I expected. I was still sitting there, lost in thought, when the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Hello? There was a pause on the other end, then a voice I hadn't heard in days. Her voice, the bride's. We need to talk, she said, her voice strained. Now. I felt my chest tighten. About what? About what you don't know. About what's coming next. I stood up, my pulse quickening. What are you talking about? She took a long breath, sounding almost defeated. You think you've won, but you've just signed my death sentence. What? I asked, confused. If you think you've seen the worst of me, you haven't. I'm not letting go. Not without making sure you regret it. Her words were like a cold wind cutting through the room. The realization hit me all at once. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. Then she dropped the bombshell. You know about the money, don't you? I froze. What money? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. She let out a bitter laugh. The account I transferred everything into? The one your son didn't know about? The one I've been using to cover my tracks? I felt my heart stop. It made sense now. All the expensive clothes, the secret trips, the sudden shifts in attitude. She hadn't just been spending his money. She had been preparing for this moment. You really think this is just about a prenup? She continued. No, this is about control, and I'm going to make sure your son regrets every decision he's made. My hands shook as I held the phone. You're insane, I said, barely able to form the words. You've lost. It's over. But she wasn't done. Is it? Is it really over? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because I don't think your son knows just how deep this goes. How many people I've already made sure are on my side. She hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, staring at the phone. She hadn't just threatened us. She had set the stage for something far worse. It was clear now. She wasn't going to let go of him. Not without destroying everything in her path. And the worst part? I had a feeling she was just getting started. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something big. The call had rattled me, but it wasn't enough to keep me from thinking. She had gone too far. And my son? He was still too naive to see how deep the trap had been set. I tried to reach him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I sent a text, but it wasn't like him to avoid me. That's when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there he was. My son. And behind him, a car full of her things. What's going on? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She's gone, he said, eyes hard and hollow. She left, took everything, even the dog. I felt the blood rush to my head. Wait, what? She's gone. He slammed the door behind him. I called her bluff. I told her to leave, told her it was over. But even as he spoke, I could see it, the doubt in his eyes, the cracks in his resolve. I tried to hold it together. Are you sure? He nodded, but the tension in his face told me everything. He was broken, and he wasn't admitting it. She won't come back, Mom. She can't. Not after what happened last night. Not after what I said. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? Then the doorbell rang again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I knew who it was, and I wasn't ready. I opened it slowly. There she stood. The bride, and behind her, the lawyer. You've made a mistake, she said, her voice ice cold. My son's face went pale. Mom, he whispered. You have no idea what you're dealing with, the bride continued, her eyes dark, her smile almost cruel. You think I'm the one who lost here? She stepped forward. I still hold all the cards, all of them. I couldn't believe it. It was like she had been waiting for this moment, this final play. The lawyer beside her didn't speak. He just stood there, like a shadow. You don't have him anymore, I said, my voice suddenly steady. You never did. The bride's eyes narrowed, and for the first time I saw the cracks in her armor. Don't make the mistake of thinking you have the upper hand, she hissed. I stepped forward, ignoring the pounding in my chest. You didn't just mess with him. You messed with me, and now you'll pay. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the lawyer spoke, his voice low and professional. This is going to get ugly. You've made a legal mistake that could cost you everything. The bride's face twitched, but she didn't back down. You think I'm scared of losing? You have no idea what I've been through. No idea what I'm capable of. And just like that, I understood. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about a prenup or a marriage. This was about control. And for her, this was the only battle that mattered. I looked at my son. You need to get out of this now, before it's too late. He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. Then, with a quiet nod, he walked past me, toward the door. And for the first time, I realized he was finally listening. He was finally ready to stop being controlled. But she wasn't done yet. You think you've won? The bride's voice rose. I'll make sure you regret this. You'll both regret it. And just before she turned, she dropped a bombshell. The wedding's still on, and you'll both be sorry when it's over. I froze. What was she talking about? But before I could react, she was gone. I looked at my son. He was already at the door, his hand on the knob. We need to go, he said, his voice firm. And this time, I didn't argue. We didn't say a word as we walked down the hall. It was like the world had suddenly gone silent. Every step felt heavy, like we were carrying the weight of all the decisions we'd made. We got to the front door, and my son paused, his hand on the doorknob. He looked at me, eyes full of uncertainty. Are you sure about this, Mom? His voice cracked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure myself. What was I sure of anymore? We don't have a choice, I said. We need to take control back, now. He hesitated, but he knew it was true. I knew it too. We walked out together, my son's footsteps echoing as we left the house behind. But just as we reached the driveway, we stopped. Mom, what if we're too late? He turned to face me, his face drawn tight. I could see the fear in his eyes now, the fear that had been buried beneath his anger. "We're not too late," I said firmly. "We've got this." But even as I said it, I knew things weren't as simple as that. She had already made her move, and I wasn't sure if we could stop her. Suddenly, the roar of an engine broke the silence. A car sped toward us, its headlights blinding in the dark. Before I could react, the car screeched to a halt and the door flew open. There she was, the bride. She stood there smiling as if nothing had happened, like she hadn't just tried to tear apart everything I loved. "You're too late," she said, her voice full of satisfaction. "The deal is done. The wedding's still going ahead. You're out. For good." My son took a step forward, his face hard, but I could see the panic rising in his eyes. "No." It was all he said, his voice low but firm. I stepped in front of him. I didn't know what was coming, but I wasn't backing down. "You've made a huge mistake," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "You think this is over? You've underestimated me. All of you." The bride raised an eyebrow, suddenly looking a little less confident. "Oh, really?" she said, as if mocking me. "And what exactly are you going to do about it?" I took a deep breath. I'd been preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, the words didn't come easily. "This isn't about a wedding," I said, my voice growing louder. "It's about power. You're trying to control my son, and you're trying to destroy everything we've built, but you don't control us. Not anymore." The bride's face twisted in anger. "You're nothing but a nuisance," she spat. "This is my life, not yours." For a split second, I almost believed her, but I couldn't back down. I glanced at my son. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in days, he nodded. "Mom's right," he said quietly, his voice filled with a new strength I hadn't seen before. "It's over." The bride's eyes widened, her hand gripping the car door tighter. But before she could say another word, I pulled out my phone. "You've made your move," I said, dialing a number I had saved for this exact moment. "Now it's my turn." The phone rang once, then twice. On the third ring, someone picked up. "Hello?" It was the lawyer, the one she thought was on her side. "It's time to end this," I said, my voice calm, though my heart was beating faster than ever. "I need you to reverse the transfer, now." I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Do it." I hung up without another word. The silence between us was deafening. The bride's eyes were wide with disbelief. She tried to open her mouth, but nothing came out. It was done. I turned to my son. "We're not done yet, but we've won the first round?" He looked at me, his face filled with awe and something else, something deeper. For the first time, I saw the respect in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. I smiled, though it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. But we were getting there, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my life back.